for the glory of old state, for her founder strong and great, for the future that we wait. Raise the song, raise the song.
Sing our love and loyalty.
Sing our hopes that bright and free.
Rest, O Mother dear, with thee. All with thee, all with thee.
Where else would you rather be? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association. Welcome to the People of Penn State podcast. Each week on the podcast, you can expect to hear the voices of Penn Staters talking about what they're passionate about, and you can expect to feel the pride and the power of the Penn State network. The People of Penn State podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Subscribe and give us a rating. Ratings and reviews are the best way to help other Penn Staters find these great stories. Today on the podcast, we're going to talk to Katie Kemmerer. She is the executive project manager for the Kansas City Chiefs. She is in her 5th season with the club. In her role, she manages the international expansion of the Chiefs brand, as well as oversees brand activations in the Kansas City area. She's got to work on some really cool projects like the Chiefs Super Bowl ring after they won the Super Bowl. She managed that project. Chiefs Fit, Chiefs Style, the Chiefs charity game. Prior to her current position, Katie interned in the community outreach department with the Kansas City Chiefs. She graduated from Penn State in 2018 with a bachelor's degree in public relations and minors in business, sports journalism, digital media, trends, and analytics. I'm excited to talk to Katie. So let's welcome her on to the People of Penn State podcast. Katie, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Joining us a little early out there in Kansas City.
A little bit. I mean, it could be worse.
Yeah. I now realize that I timestamped this for a podcast that people are going to listen to at their leisure. But it's early morning in Kansas City there, Central Time. We are on East Coast time here in Happy Valley. Let's start at the very beginning. You're a graduate of Schuylkill Valley High School. How did you become a Penn State Nittany Lion?
Yeah, I would say it was mainly my dad and some of my friends just kind of going and reiterating that they thought Penn State was a good school for me, and then I should go tour it. Completely honest, I was 100% against going to Penn State for probably the first 2 years of college searching. I was looking at a little bit of smaller schools, and then I'd actually gone out to West Virginia University and toured there and really loved the big college atmosphere. So my parents signed me up for a tour of Penn State without me really knowing. And I did the spend a summer day there. And before I even had the official spend a summer day, I already knew I was going to go to Penn State. So it was a very quick, solid, fell in love with it. And the rest was history, but definitely didn't grow up like I'm going to Penn State person like
Sure.
A lot of people do.
Sure. Although you grew up in the heart of Penn State country, right?
Yes. Yeah. And we were Penn State
and-
fans. Yeah. So we were Penn State fans growing up. We watched all the games, but it always seemed too big of a school for me. I come from a very small high school. So I think that was another piece of it. And then once you realize how small Penn State can feel, it was a very, very obvious choice to go there.
Yeah, I think it's easy to find like your people and take a community, at least here at University Park, which is about 45,000 students, and find like your own small community within a community.
Absolutely. Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about that community within a community that you found here at Penn State. You held various sports-related internships with our athletics department. What were you involved in as a student, and how did that help you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so the first club I ever joined was the Association for Women in Sports Media, right as a freshman. And I think the club had only been around for maybe 2 years at that point. It was still very new. And a lot of the girls in that club took me under their wing. I got to know John Affleck really well, and some of the other professors that are just involved with that club. And the women in that really guided me as the paths I should be taking to really build out my resume. So Awesome was one of the first ones. I was the treasurer vice president, and then eventually president of the club during my time at Penn State. And then the other club I was a member of was Penn State Lion Scouts. So I was one of the tour guides walking backwards around campus every day. And for me, that was a little bit mix of fun and all the charitable work that the club does was really what brought me to it. And then obviously getting to talk about Penn State every day is fun. And I would say Lion Scouts really brought me out of my shell and allowed me to be able to talk to really any group of people, which is something I struggled with the first couple years of college. So for me, that was also the main benefit of joining. That was just learning how to talk to literally anyone that you could come across and being able to do so for a couple hours, not just a couple minutes. And then related to some of the internships I had. So I started in the customer relations department for Penn State athletics and did a semester there and learned very quickly that I'm not cut out for sales or fan experience or customer experience in any capacity. And then I took a chance and applied for Penn State football's coaches video position. I just got it from an email from Bob, who sends out the college comm like internship opportunities. And I candidly did not even know how to turn on a camera. And for some reason, my boss at the time thought that I was still a good fit and hired me for the position. So I learned kind of how to use a camera, although I saw him a few weeks ago and he said, I still don't think I'd put you behind the camera. So clearly that's not my best realm of sports business, but yeah, so I did coaches video for a year with Penn State football, and it was the year we won the Big Ten championship. So it was super fun and exciting year to be part of the team. And then an opportunity opened up with the Penn State Sports Info office. And it was mainly to work with their men's tennis team. And I had played tennis in high school and loved the sport and got the opportunity to work directly as their main point of contact. But then I also got to still work football game days and some of the other sports like wrestling. And for me, that was a really just cool opportunity because sports info was the direction I really thought I wanted to go and saw myself going. And learned kind of quickly that I also didn't think that that was my long-term career path, but it was really good experience to just get to know it and kind of feel how that day-to-day looked. And then because of my experience in Awesome and having some of the connections and network just built off of that with former Penn State students, I got the opportunity to intern with the Steelers in Heinz Field the summer going into my senior year of college. And that was in the corporate events department. So weddings, random banquets, proms, you name it. I got to help plan them and really see that whole side of it while also learning how the pros work. And for me, that kind of solidified that I definitely wanted to be in the NFL. That pro sports was probably a better fit just because it is more of a business compared to college, which I think college is a great starting point, but I wanted the routine of kind of a pro league. And then from there, my senior year, I got the opportunity to direct Quiet Sundays, which was a documentary that the John Curley Center put on. And that was a class, but I think for me, it was also really the launching point to my career for networking and some of that stuff. So I would say those are the big things I did on campus. I think that's everything. But yeah, it was a fun 4 years. That's for sure.
Excellent. All right, let's go back. You're a Lion Scout. You're giving a tour on campus. What was your fun fact?
Oh, this is my favorite. The weather is only right, or 1 out of 4 meteorologists come from Penn State. That's why the weather's only right 25% of the time. Yeah,
that's a good one.
I still tell it. Like I still rely on that one sometimes.
Right. So when you came to Penn State, you clearly had an interest in communications, an interest in journalism. Where did the love of sport come into play, and how did your interest shift to wanting to work in sports versus other realms of journalism or media?
Yeah. So for as long as I can remember, sports were a big part. I'm an only child, so I think a lot of it too was, I always joke that I was like the son and the daughter. So I spent a lot of time with my dad watching games and going to games kind of in our area. And my junior year of high school, I got approached by our football coach in my high school, and they were looking for managers and basically said, do you want to be a manager your senior year, kind of learn the game a little more? So I joined basically the football team and went to all the practices at that point at high school. did a little bit of what they considered coaches video, set practices up. It was basically a hybrid of equipment, athletic training, coaches video, water girl, like you name it, we did it. And that for me was when I really realized that there could be more to working in sports beyond just kind of what you see on TV. So my coach and I, when I was applying to different schools, he's the one that really encouraged me to just look into the different fields you could go into tied to sports. And I think when you're in high school, you don't really realize how many different doors there are. So I started with broadcast journalism, changed my major my second day on campus to PR because I didn't want to be in front of the camera. And then as I was taking the PR classes and really doing some of the more related internships, I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. And I found myself really fascinated by just how the business works kind of top to bottom. Some of my favorite classes I took were like comm law and business law. And from there, it just really felt like where I was going to end up was probably more business focused than communications focused. But I think both are really helpful. Like I understand how newsrooms work and I understand the importance of like positive PR strategy, but now I can also go and talk about P&Ls with our CFO. So it's, I think it was just really the interests I was finding myself drawn to and the people that I really was inspired by ended up being more in the business realm and less in the communications realm.
This is the People of Penn State podcast. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined by Katie Kemmerer. She's the executive project manager for the Kansas City Chiefs. So before we dive into the specifics of your job, give us an overview of what your day-to-day looks like with the Chiefs. What are you responsible for?
Yeah, so every day is totally different, and it's a little bit across the board. So I work directly with our executive team and our team president, kind of when anything they could need or could pop up has been a big piece of it. But then beyond that, my job is kind of broken down into a few different projects. And the best way to describe them is anything that's either really important to the Hunt family or is brand new for the organization. So I do a lot with Chiefs Fit, which is our team brand and fitness facility. We are kind of working on our international expansion and we have marketing rights in Germany and Mexico. So working with all the agencies to basically build a brand in those countries. I do a lot then too with like Chief Style Lounge, which is a fashion show and is really important to our ownership and some of those more one-off kind of year-by-year projects, but it can be anything, which is also really exciting. For example, preseason, we found out Texas Tech was going to put Patrick in the Texas Tech Hall of Fame, and we had about 3 days to flip everything and get our announcement ready for him because it was going to happen after one of our preseason games. So that's something that just came to me. Here are the people you need to work with. Here's when it's happening. Go figure it out. So it's a lot of that. I would say it keeps me on my toes. International is kind of like the wild, wild west when it comes to the NFL. So you're trying to figure it out as the NFL is trying to figure it out, as the other clubs in market are trying to figure it out. But every day is different. I would say it's fun 95% of the time, but there are days it definitely still feels like work. And then obviously we get to cap off every week with a game in season. So it's across the board, but it's usually fun.
Yeah, 95% is a really good number. If you can hit that number for fun at work, I think that's a really good job. When you talk about international expansion, certainly we've seen NFL games in Mexico City. We've seen them in London. But how, from a brand expansion standpoint, do you approach that? How do you identify the markets that you want to be in? You mentioned Mexico and Germany, right? How do those markets emerge for you? How do you identify other emerging markets to bring the Chiefs brand into?
Yeah. So a few years ago, it was pre-COVID. The NFL provided basically decks, and it was just all the information you could possibly need or think you would need to make a decision like that. And it was hyper-focused on a few countries, but they were also open to you making the case for any country. So based on that, we looked at just the different data. The Chiefs actually have a pretty strong tie to international going back through the 90s. They played a preseason game in Berlin 8 months after the wall fell. So it's been a passion project, and our ownership has really been drivers for international. And based on that, that's how we kind of narrowed down our choices to the countries that we thought would be the best fit for the Chiefs brand, that we could see those markets growing into powerhouses for the NFL. And that's how we made our choices. So Germany, candidly, we kind of had an inclination that that's where the growth was really going to take place in the NFL. A lot of fans that go to the UK games come over from Germany. NFL Europe was really successful in Germany. Frankfurt still has a pretty strong NFL fandom. So Germany for us was pretty easy choice. And then we talked about like the UK, and we talked about Brazil and Australia and all these different countries. And what it comes down to is just time differences, travel time from Kansas City, how many other teams we thought were going to bid on that market. And then Mexico came into play just because of how close it is to Kansas City. Mexico City's in the same time zone as us. It's a 2-hour flight. So, and we do have a massive following in Mexico already. So those were kind of the key factors we looked at when deciding. And then the NFL opened up a bid process where you basically had to submit proposals on what you would do in market, what you'd be willing to spend in market, what your goals would be for the market, how you would measure growth over a 5-year span. So a lot of different aspects to it. And thankfully we were awarded both countries we bid on. And now we're in the building out phase. We just hit 1 year officially in market on January 1st. So it's been a fun year. It's been a year full of learning. And then just kind of going forward, I think for us, it's really just measuring how fandom works and then how the fans are growing in these different places. And then the other piece of it too is just trying to understand the business implications or the growth of your business by also working in different countries. So Germany, for example, a lot of their economic hub is also in Amsterdam and Switzerland. So is it worth going to those countries, or do we stay out of those countries and do we look at expanding to like a Brazil or expanding to Australia or Canada, since we're just as close to Canada as we are Mexico. So it's a constant just kind of learning and looking at data and really getting a feel where you think the NFL could grow in a few years.
So that's really interesting. I didn't, when we were thinking about the international expansion question, or when I was thinking about asking you about it, I didn't realize it was regulated by the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
I figured Kansas City could probably just identify what markets they want to go after, but it sounds like it's a highly regulated process.
Yeah. Actually, until last January, you weren't allowed to do anything in market that could generate revenue. So the only things you really could do at that point were social media, and it couldn't be paid social. So there were a few clubs. Steelers had some accounts set up already. Patriots had some accounts kind of set for different countries, but beyond that, it's very much controlled by the league office, and it's also, that's part of the learning curve, right? So it's the first time the NFL's ever done this. There's a lot of questions as you plan things and as you put things into motion. So it's we've been very grateful that the NFL has been super helpful with a lot of what we've been doing, and it's you learn something new literally every day.
Yeah. As I think about expansion of the Chiefs brand, not only internationally but even domestically,
Mm-hmm.
I think of how accessible the NFL is to fans everywhere now, right? I mean, I remember growing up in northeastern Pennsylvania,
Mm-hmm.
I had two options. I could be a Giants fan or I can be an Eagles fan.
Yep.
And by the grace of God, I became an Eagles fan. So, but now it's people can watch any team anytime they want, right? If they have the right DirecTV package, they can listen on satellite radio to any team that they might be a fan of.
Yeah.
And so what we might have thought maybe even 5-10 years ago as a geographic footprint, there are fans now all over the country, all over the world. I saw a stat the other day. I'm not sure if it's still true, but the Kansas City Chiefs have season ticket holders in all 50 states.
Yeah.
Which is
I know
unbelievable.
someone that lives like where I'm from in Pennsylvania that has season tickets and will come out, and it's just, it's incredible. Going back to just the international fans worldwide, we have a fan in Germany. She kind of leads one of the fan groups out there. She started it herself. And for context, a Sunday night football game kicks off at 2 a.m. in Germany. And she will text me when the game ends, congratulating us like on the win. And it's just, I'm like, go to bed. It's so early. Why are you awake? So they bleed Chiefs colors and they bleed the fandom, and they're just as passionate as fans here, which I think is really, really cool. And I'm excited that more people are getting to see it too, now that we're able to do more with those groups.
Yeah. We talked about international expansion and how the NFL has regulated that. I would imagine that there's regulations on how and where you can go into certain markets within the U.S. as well, right?
Yeah.
So
Basically you get, I don't remember the exact mileage. I want to say 150 miles from your stadium that you get to market in. So it may be a little more because I know Nebraska technically falls in ours, but you have that radius and you can do basically anything in that radius. It's called your home marketing area. So you can run billboards, you can have partnership agreements, you can basically do, to an extent, whatever you want to do in that 150 miles, but then you can't go into any other team's 150 miles and make money off of it. So for example, we can't go into Las Vegas and run billboards. We can't go into Seattle and run billboards. But we can have fan parties and we can have fan rallies and some of that stuff where it's more, we host something at a bar for a group of fans before a game if we're in that city. So you can do small stuff like that. But yeah, it's very strict. And it's definitely something that you don't mess with. And if you do, you're going to get in some serious trouble with the league and probably that club that you're trying to mess with. So that was a whole nother piece of learning for me, was just where those radiuses are and how can we, here you plan for that 150 mile radius, you're planning for a city, but then you go into a place like Germany or Mexico and you have the entire country. So that's where it's also hard too, because you want to become so focused on one city in those countries, but you have to be accounting for literally the rest of the country as well. So it's definitely a tricky process, but it's easy when the NFL is helpful with navigating a lot of it too.
Yeah, it strikes me as interesting. I'm sure some of the things happen organically where you might expand into a market because of a player that now plays for your team but may have played college football at Texas Tech, right? Where you now have a somewhat fan base in West Texas because of what Patrick did out there.
Yep. Yeah, we have a good amount of fans down there. A good chunk of our front office is from Pennsylvania, so we have that following as well. But it's kind of across the board. It's fun to look at like the sales maps and see where fans are, because you can track it based on like jersey sales and some of that stuff. So there's these little hot spots popping up where all our top players are from.
So people go to an NFL game, they go to a Penn State football game, they see ads in the stadiums, they see promotions going on during timeouts. Talk about how you help brands align with the Chiefs brand and how that leads to business success for them.
Yeah, so I would say my two kind of realms that I do it with is Chiefs charity games. So it's actually with a nonprofit in the city, and then with Chiefs Fit, which is our team brand of fitness facilities. So I would say a lot of it is because of how good our creative director is. He is the brand. When it boils down, he is what the Chiefs should be. And he does a really good job of setting brand guidelines and brand expectations and kind of establishing the brand every year. So it's fun and it's new, but it's also us. And we then get to take that to, I'm going to use charity game as the example, but we get to take that to then a group called Moxa, who his premise is to combat sexual assault in our communities. And they get to now use our brand to help fundraise. And we help basically charities every year in this instance raise nearly $500,000 a year, just because they're getting to use Chiefs assets then for that Chiefs charity game. So that's just one example of the good it can do. And then Chiefs Fit, for example, you're taking something as simple as like a Crunch Fitness or a 24-hour fitness, and then you're branding it Chiefs. And now you have this Chiefs branded gym that everyone wants to go to because it has Travis Kelce on the walls, and you never know who might pop by for an autograph session. So we have Tamba Ali Friday. So you never know. And I think that's what makes it really fun, is that you're putting the strength of one thing and you're adding the strength of now hopefully a global brand in the Chiefs, and you're merging them together, which is kind of a no-brainer for some of the companies and groups we get to work with.
That's great. It's always great when you can also work in an icon of Penn State football into the answer with the shout out to Tom Ali. Building, everybody, I think, sports fans in particular want, always dream about a career in sports, right?
Mm-hmm.
And working in sports. But as you know, and as I have learned, it is tough, right? There's long hours. There's lots of competition for these jobs. Talk about how you transitioned from and kind of built your career from seasonal work, right? And with internships, then seasonal work, and now into a full-time gig.
Yeah, I would say it's being patient is a big part of it, but then also staying true to what you're feeling and communicating that with people that can help. So for me, I really enjoyed my first 6 months here when I was an intern in community, and communicated that with my then boss, that I'd be more than happy to stay here if something part-time would open up, if something full-time would open up. Can I do another internship? And just really left it open-ended. Like, I'm very willing to come back. I'm very willing to stay here. And then just let me know. And I actually was moving back. I was driving back to Pennsylvania. I was in Indianapolis, and I got a call that they were going to bring me back part-time. So I asked, I was like, okay, can I have a month? Because I'm 8 hours from home, but I'm also 8 hours from Kansas City, and I don't have a place to live in Kansas City. So I ended up driving home, moving home for a month, and then I turned around and moved back to Kansas City, and I did part-time in community outreach, worked 2 jobs for a while, and what was my current position opened up, and had some really good conversations with people I trusted in the organization, because I was essentially leaving what I thought I wanted to do forever in community, and kind of taking a chance on a role that was essentially a new job. It was a little bit of an exec admin role, also a project role. No one really knew to an extent what it could turn into. So had some really good conversations, had some really hard conversations. And I think in those instances, you have to lean on the people that know you best and that you trust. So obviously I called my parents. I called John Affleck, and we talked for maybe 6 minutes. And the first thing he said to me is, if you don't take that, you're crazy. And that was kind of like okay, I think you're right there, but I still don't know. And then met with a few of executives in our building that are still here and have really helped guide me as I make choices of where I want to be and where I think I could end up. And they all kind of said the same thing, like, if you don't take this, you're crazy. So ended up taking it, and it's worked out in my favor. But I think the biggest thing is timing is always a factor, but as long as you have the experience kind of built up from college, right? You have at least 2 internships and they're prominent internships. All experience is good, but I think the more you can do tied to big college programs or get your foot in the door with an NFL team, even if it's working game days, those are the things that people will look for. And then you're coming into any internship kind of ahead, because now you have the experience of that from college, and now you're adding it to your experience in the NFL. And I think it helps escalate how ready you could be for a full-time position in the NFL. So I think it's really just being patient and then trusting the people that know you best.
Katie, we often talk about the power of the Penn State network. What was the role that alumni played in helping you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I would say it's the main factor. So as I mentioned, we did the Quiet Sundays documentary in 2017. We went to London, and that entire trip was actually made possible by a Penn State alumni that works in the league office. He's a senior VP there, and he was on the trip for the Wembley games there, and I got to know him, and we went to dinner with him and everyone on our crew, and just really was asking questions of how did you get to your position. And he actually knew a decent amount about everyone on the trip already. He looked us all up and saw what we had done. And we talked a while about what I had done for the Steelers and where I saw myself going. And he gave me his business card and said, email me when you get back to the States. So I did. I thanked him for the trip, everything. it was truly at that point a once in a lifetime experience going to Wembley and getting to cover the games. And his reply to my thank you email was an intern or an application to be an intern for him at the Super Bowl that year. And I was shocked. It was a goal I had set for myself, was to be an intern at the Super Bowl like some students do. And I just didn't really know how to go about it, because usually it comes from Mike Poorman, but I didn't know Mike, and we still joke about it because Mike was like, who the heck's Katie? How's she going to the Super Bowl? And so I applied for that, got to go to Super Bowl 52 when the Eagles won. And how the Super Bowls work is basically PR teams from every single team are at the Super Bowl, because there's so much press going on and media row. There's interviews all week long. And I got to know the Chiefs staff really well and hit it off with their PR team. Just asked if I could set up some phone calls basically once we were back from the Super Bowl, and just, what do you look for? What were your paths? And really not ask for anything other than advice. And I did end up applying for the PR internship, and I ended up applying for the community internship with the Chiefs. I didn't get the PR internship, which is still kind of a running joke with one of our PR guys here. He was like, it was the most awkward phone call because we wanted you, and then you told me you already had a job with us. So it was like this hodgepodge of how I ended up here. But really, it comes down to getting to go on that trip to London, getting that one business card, and then all these opportunities just started to open up based on one alumni taking the time to put me in a spot to do so. So, and I think there's a lot of that in my past. The Steelers came because of a Penn State alumni. The men's tennis SID came because of a current student that had graduated and recommended I take her spot. So there's layers of that kind of throughout my whole career path of former students or former classmates recommending. And then as you build the network, you get to know a lot of Penn Staters, and there are not many in Kansas City, but the ones that are, we know each other. So I think it's just, using the network as early as you can, and using those classmates from early on as your network. And then you never know who you're going to meet, and the rest can change in an instant.
Well, Katie, as an Eagles fan, I appreciate the shout out for the Super Bowl victory. What a great moment for Eagles fans all over the world.
Yeah.
This is the People of Penn State podcast. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined by Katie Kemmerer. She's the executive project manager with the Kansas City Chiefs. So, Katie, at the end of the podcast, we like to have a little bit of fun. So I'm going to throw some quick hitter questions at you.
Okay.
You just kind of blurt out what the first thing that comes to mind. Okay.
Yep.
Your favorite class at Penn State?
I want to say Crisis Comm, which I feel like everyone's going to be like, how? But I still love that class. And the hot seat was the best and worst thing I've ever done.
Was that Steve Manuel?
It was Steve Manuel.
Yeah.
I love Steve, but the hot seat, I feel like I can go into anything ready now because I did that.
Yeah, Steve Manuel is a good friend to the Penn State Alumni Association. All right, Arthur Bryant's or Slaps?
Slaps.
Slaps, okay. Before the Chiefs, what was your favorite NFL team?
The Seahawks.
How does that happen?
So my dad is a Raiders fan, which also causes no issues in my life. He's a Raiders fan, and I have family in Seattle. And when I was kind of trying to figure out who I wanted to be a fan of, I tested out every team. I tried a lot of teams, and we actually were in Seattle, and my uncle was like, well, why don't you be a Seahawks fan? They used to be a rival of the Raiders, and that'll make your dad kind of mad, but it's not divisional. And I was like, yeah, let's do Seahawks. And it stuck. So was a Seahawks fan for over 10 years.
That's amazing. If you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be and why?
Ooh, I would, two people. They're very different. Tiger Woods, is my all-time favorite athlete. I think just his comeback story to an extent, but also I'd be so curious about what his training and upbringing was like. I literally have a little figurine of him on my desk. And then Amy Trask, she was the first female CEO in the NFL. She worked for the Raiders. Her story I think is pretty incredible, and she was blazing trails in the 90s already. So I think I've met her very briefly, but I would love to sit and have dinner with her.
So you get to travel all over the world. What is your most unusual we are moment?
They're all in airports. I did see someone in Germany wearing a Penn State hat, but they weren't close enough that I could say anything and see if they were a tourist or how that happened.
Right.
So that's probably one of the weirdest. And then, London airport.
How about your favorite Penn State sport?
Definitely football, but I'm also a very big Penn State wrestling fan. So it's a close one.
Did you watch the match the other night? Who did we wrestle? It was Friday night. Were we up in Wisconsin?
Yeah, Wisconsin.
Yeah. And then favorite flavor of creamery ice cream?
Keeny Beanie.
Keeny Beanie. All right. That might be a first on
Yep.
the People of Penn State podcast. Well,
I'm honored to have it.
Katie, we want to thank you for joining us and allowing us to share your story to Penn Staters worldwide. Thanks for being a guest on the People of Penn State.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And thanks to our producer, Vincent Longaro. I know he enjoyed this interview as a lifelong Kansas City Chiefs fan. If you liked the episode, I hope that you will subscribe to the People of Penn State podcast in your favorite podcast app of choice. And while you're there, go ahead and give us a rating, drop us a review, help us spread the word, share the podcast with your friends and fellow Penn Staters via social media channels. And don't forget to tag the Penn State Alumni Association when you do that. If you're a member of the Alumni Association, thank you for your support. And if you're not, what are you waiting for? Go to our website at alumni.psu.edu today, and you too can become a member of the world's largest alumni association. Thank you for listening and for all you do for the glory, for the future, and for the university. We are.
When we stood at childhood's gate, shapeless in the hands of fate, thou didst mold us, dear old state, dear old state, dear old state. May no act of ours bring shame to one heart that loves thy name. May our lives but swell thy fame, dear old state, dear old state.